The video opens with Dan coming up to this huge old house that looks like nature is reclaiming it. Dan is just quietly walking around the perimeter of this building. Dan walks down the stairs, he opens the door, and he walks into this hallway, and as soon as he goes in, you see all this old clothing strewn about on the ground, and the paint is peeling off the walls in every part of the building. He begins walking down this hallway, and you hear under his boots the crunch of broken glass, and as he's walking, you hear Dan's voice say, "This is a children's asylum that shut down sometime in the 1990s. He pauses and says, "You know, something really strange happened while I was filming inside of this building." He heard what sounded like someone running around on the top floor of this building. And so instinctively, he assumes it's got to be some animal that's taken up residence on the top floor. And so he doesn't worry about it. He ends up walking around the whole first floor before making his way upstairs. And he said when he got up there, he was expecting to see some animal or some sign of an animal living up there. But he didn't. He didn't see anything. It just looked like every other abandoned building. And after filming what he wanted to film, he eventually leaves the building and goes home. It wasn't until he loaded the footage onto his computer and began reviewing it that he noticed two specific instances while he was inside this asylum where clearly someone else is in the room with him. Dan speculates that perhaps a former patient has come back here and is living in one of the rooms upstairs. Here are the two segments from his video that show this kind of phantom person lurking in the shadows. In the first clip, keep your eyes on the door that is open leading downstairs. You'll see there is a shadow on the door that is being cast from whatever is standing at the top of the stairs just outside of our view. And at some point, as Dan is filming down the hall, that shadow vanishes down the stairs. In the second clip, when Dan walks into the room, look to the back left-hand side of the room at the door, specifically at the open hole where there should be a doorknob. You will see there is very clearly someone looking through the hole at Dan, and when Dan films this person, they run away.
All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around, then he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. I honestly don't think that the guy knew him at all. I think he was just really crazy.
Vince Lee boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Winnipeg, Canada, using a fake name. He had left his house abruptly without telling his wife where he was going, but he left her a note, which she would later give to police, and the note just said, "I'm gone, don't look for me." Sitting in one of the last seats in the bus was a 22-year-old father named Tim McLean. When he got on board, he was exhausted, so he went to the back of the bus, put his headphones in, leaned his head against the glass, and had fallen asleep. Some of the 36 other passengers on board would say Vince was acting very strange. And at one point, Vince got up and he was pacing up and down the aisle towards the front of the bus. When the bus made a quick stop, Vince stood up, moved to the very back of the bus, and sat directly next to Tim in the same seat. Tim woke up, turned over, looked at Vince, gave him a quick smile, and then rolled back over and fell asleep, unfazed. 5 minutes later, Tim is still fast asleep against the window. Vince comes out of the bathroom and he goes back into his seat, but instead of sitting down, he puts his right knee on his seat and plants his left foot on the ground right in front of his seat, so he's facing Tim. He pulls his knife out of the sheath and drives it into Tim's neck. Tim woke up and he was trying to fight him off of him and he was screaming for help, but Vince was robotic and unemotional, just continuously attacking Tim. Other passengers were half asleep when this started, and so it took a minute before it registered with everyone what was going on, and quickly people started screaming, and then the bus driver pulled over and people were clamoring to get out of the bus. Once off the bus, a couple of the male passengers decided they had to go back in and try to save Tim, but when they walked up the steps and looked down the aisle, they saw Vince had pulled Tim out into the aisle. At this point, Vince whipped his head around and looked at the three men that had come on the bus, and he jumped up and charged them with the knife, at which point the three men retreated, and luckily one of them was the driver, who was able to initiate the security system on the bus that made it immobile so Vince couldn't drive it away, and it shut permanently the doors until you deactivated the security system. Vince tried to push the doors open, but he couldn't do it, so he went back up and continued to attack Tim's body. While waiting for the police to show up, horrified onlookers had to watch Vince as he continued to attack Tim. Finally, the police arrived, and after a standoff, Vince leapt out of one of the windows and was tased and then arrested. Once in custody, he said he was sorry, but he also said the reason he did it was God was speaking to him while he was sitting on the bus, and he was instructing him that Tim was an alien who was going to attack him, and so he needed to go kill the alien to save the world. In a controversial turn of events, Vince Lee was found not criminally responsible for the death of Tim McLean, and so was not given jail time. He was sent to a treatment program that after he finished, he was fully released. He was allowed to change his name. He has no restrictions. He has no supervision. He is a totally free man. Just minutes after Vince was apprehended by police, one of the passengers who had been sitting near Tim when the attack started gave an interview where he described what happened.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife. Everybody got off the bus. Me and a trucker that had stopped and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button and the door shut. The three of us had weapons from the trucker's truck there, and we just stayed outside while he tried to get out the door. Telling him, no, stay put, stay there, don't try to come out. The guy, he didn't care at all. He wasn't concerned with anybody, but the guy, I honestly don't think that the guy knew him at all. I think he was just really crazy.
Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.